Okay, excellent, excellent. So again, apologies. Okay, so with that, I will call this meeting to order. This is our special meeting of the Board of Directors and our Metropolitan Water District Representatives Caucus. If you would go ahead and do a roll call, Greg.
Absolutely. We'll start with Director Williams.
Here.
Director Gray.
Here.
Director Deere. Director Deere. Okay, Director Alvarez. Director Alvarez. So that'll bring us to President Houston.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum of 3 board members, and we have you, Director Houston. So we have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
We do not have any here in the room, but let me ask if anyone on the platform who would like to make a public comment, recognize yourself by raising your hand on the platform. And I do not see any hands raised at this time. So I think the answer is no public comment at this time, President Houston.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg. So we'll move right along here. I see no items here under 3 discussion items, 4 MWD other matters, 5 MWD consent calendar, or 6 MWD other board items. So it looks like we can go all the way to item 7, which is MWD board information items. So if you'll take that away, item 7A.
Absolutely, and we can hand it over to Liz Croson, Chief Sustainability, Resiliency, and Innovation Officer for Metropolitan Water District. And she's here to provide a presentation on Metropolitan's climate action planning efforts. So we're really fortunate to have Liz Croson with us today. So Liz, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me. It's great to see you all directors and to have this opportunity to directly interface with you on our climate action and sustainability efforts. So I believe I've met most of you, and I think you know I recently joined Metropolitan. It's been about 11 months as the Chief Sustainability, Resilience, and Innovation Officer, and this has been an exciting time at Metropolitan as we establish this new office and really build a team and build some momentum around these efforts. And I want to say, first of all, since I know many of you have been involved with Metropolitan for a long time, that there is a lot of sustainability and resilience and innovation already happening at Metropolitan. And really, this office is about bringing that all together and really serving as the connective tissue between the different groups at Metropolitan and elevating those efforts. And of course, identifying where there are gaps and helping to fill those gaps by working cross-sector in the agency. So I want to make that very clear. So as we have started to create this office, we've really started to think about, I think, there are lots of definitions out there when it comes to sustainability. And we've really started to think about what that means for Metropolitan and really taking a holistic look at how we approach our strategies, our activities, our operations, and doing that in a way that's protecting and enhancing both human and natural resources in the future. And I think kind of the key point on this sustainability definition for us is when we talk about the future, we are talking about a bit of a moving target. So as we are acknowledging this new kind of changing normal with climate change, our definition of sustainability is certainly one that will continue to shift and adapt as we all adapt to emerging science and information. So when we are thinking about sustainability at the district, there's a lot of different categories that really falls into. And I don't think any of these categories will be surprising to you, but they do go beyond some of, our core activities around water supply, because much of what we do in water supply is impacted by our activities in energy, for instance, or in watershed protection upstream of our water supply sources, or in our zero emission fleet and how we build resilience in those operations. So we are really taking a holistic view of our both supply and operations at Metropolitan to ensure that we're thinking about environmental protection, social equity around those initiatives, as well as the economic vitality of both the district, our member agencies, and the communities that we serve. So as we've set up the office, we have developed kind of our own vision statement about what it is that we are striving to achieve within the what we call SRI office, and really thinking about a resilient and equitable water future. And I think what I like most about what we've developed so far is really this mission statement, which builds on Metropolitan's mission statement to deliver safe and affordable water to 19 million residents in Southern California. Our goal in our office is to empower all of Metropolitan to deliver that message by inspiring innovative solutions that benefit people, nature, and the climate. So really helping Metropolitan, bolstering Metropolitan's effort by empowering our staff, our member agencies, our communities, in order to do that in a way that's sustainable, innovative, and resilient. So we have developed 3 kind of focused strategic priorities within our office. And today I'm really going to focus on this first one, on our work under the Climate Action Plan. I'm always interested in coming back and talking to you about some of the other ones. And I will mention that we will also be regularly reporting at the One Water and Stewardship Committee on our activities around sustainability, resilience, and innovation. So there will be many more opportunities. The Climate Action Plan, as you are all aware, was approved by the board unanimously in May of 2022. And this is really a detailed plan to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, to really take responsibility for our role in producing climate change. And at the same time, looking for as many opportunities as possible to create co-benefits that both mitigate climate change and adapt to a changing climate. So the CAP itself, these are kind of the components of the plan. It includes a qualified GHG reduction plan. So not only is our Climate Action Plan just a plan itself, but we actually did it in a way that creates a programmatic EIR under CEQA. And that means that it helps us streamline the GHG analysis that we're required to do by the state for upcoming projects and upcoming environmental reviews. So it allows us to use that reduction plan in the future. It also will help us offset our GHG emissions for future capital projects, like if we were to pursue Pure Water Southern California. And then it also sets this goal of carbon neutrality by 2045. And this is aligned with the state of California's goal as well. And it really looks at how we increase, like I mentioned, our resiliency and our energy independence, because our water supply is so dependent on our power sources and electricity. So this is a graph of our GHG emissions over time. We've had detailed GHG inventory since 2005, which is a great tool and a real accomplishment by Metropolitan to have been tracking that. And these emissions over time, they look really different than like if you were to look at emissions for a city or a county, because of the variability. And the reason that ours are so variable here is because this reflects us going on and off of the Colorado River aqueduct water. So one key thing to recognize is our Climate Action Plan only addresses the emissions of infrastructure that we own and operate. So that includes the Colorado River Aqueduct, but it does not include the State Water Project. So when you see our emissions dramatically decrease, that is because we were shifting over to State Water Project water. And this is not to say that we're not aware of those emissions. DWR does have its own climate action plan to track those. And we are also tracking those, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Our emissions at Metropolitan are primarily from our electricity use. It takes a lot of power to pump, to treat, to convey water. So it's no surprise that 86% of our greenhouse gas emissions does come from our use of electricity. The other sectors include construction-based emissions. That can be transportation, equipment that's used during construction, as well as the combustion within our facilities and within our fleet. So in the Climate Action Plan, as I mentioned, we have this ultimate goal of climate neutrality by 2045. And climate neutral does not mean that we will get to zero emissions necessarily at the end of that time. What it means is that we will both reduce our emissions, but we may also have activities that sequester and capture carbon as part of our climate action. And so we will zero out the emissions by 2045. And this graph is really reflecting our total carbon budget over that time. So again, you can see those fluctuations based on where we're operating. And every year and with every project, we will be calculating the estimated emissions when we do our environmental review. And we're working on processes with our engineering group to collect emissions information, the actual emissions that we emit during construction and of project development. So this is an ongoing process that we will be tracking over time. And we are showing our GHG emissions publicly now on a dashboard called CapDash. This can be accessed through the MWD website. And this actually shows our emissions over time. And you can really dive in and see our emissions by category. So you can look at, how many emissions are really from electricity versus fleet versus our treatment plants. So it really gives you an ability to do a deep dive and understand where this is coming from and how it changes over time. So this was a commitment that we made when we approved the Climate Action Plan, is to have this transparent dashboard available. One of the other features that we've included in this dashboard is the ability to look at not just our metropolitan emissions, but to aggregate those emissions with the State Water Project emissions. So we do have an option where you can look at a bar graph and see the whole picture, because we think that that's important to recognize our total impact. Despite the fact that we are not responsible for those emissions directly, we think it's important to account for them and understand that overall. So I encourage you to take a look at that dashboard. Some of the measures and strategies under the Climate Action Plan are things that you would expect. Obviously, we're looking at sort of our direct emissions, like I mentioned, our fleet, thinking about both the emissions from vehicles that harm the climate, but also in terms of our responsibility when it comes to air quality and ensuring that we're not disproportionately impacting communities in our service area, and that we're really thinking about how we can do business in a cleaner and more environmentally responsible way. And then those indirect emissions, again, coming from electricity. And we have some specific strategies that I'll talk about for moving towards renewable electricity, carbon-free electricity, and of course, always trying to be as efficient as possible in our energy use through our pumping and conveyance and operations. And then those indirect emissions, things that we don't necessarily have direct control over all the time, but where we can definitely see some either energy reductions or emissions reductions through programs like our water conservation program, carbon sequestration, and more. So to dig in a little bit on what we've done so far, on the green power purchase agreements, we've actually been able to shift some of where we buy our power from in the last year or so, and it's actually made a huge impact quickly. So we did convert some of our commercial accounts with LADWP and SoCal Edison to green rates in 2022. And so what you can see on this graph is the green line is our electricity use. That's our megawatts per hour. And you can see how the red line, which is our greenhouse gas emissions, how those sort of track with our energy use for the most part. But they start to diverge there in 2021 because of these purchases of green energy. So although our electricity use hasn't necessarily changed that dramatically, our emissions certainly have, and we're looking for additional opportunities to do this when we can. Another thing that we've started to pursue in the last several months is we've developed a task force, an executive level task force, to really talk about how do we responsibly move to zero emission vehicles. We have a very large service area. As you know, we have facilities out in the desert that where our workforce is traveling long distances. So we need to be really thoughtful about the way that we make this transition. So my office has been working closely with engineering and water systems operations to do some feasibility studies around our vehicle replacement rates, as well as how do we use our vehicles? That's a really important question that we need to understand so that we can make the best choices for moving forward. And a lot of this, I think it's important to mention, is being mandated by the state. As you are probably aware, all public agencies will be required to transition their medium and heavy duty vehicles and equipment to zero emission vehicles. 50% of our purchases by 2024 and 100% of them at least 4 or 5 years later. So this is something that is something that we need to figure out in the near term. Some other activities which you're probably aware of, because this actually started before I started, was to really look at how we implement solar and batteries at our treatment plants. And so we have been successful at doing that, and we are still working on putting in some battery storage next to some of the solar facilities that we've built out at our treatment plants, and always looking to do more. On the water conservation front, this is, again, one of those indirect emission categories, but a place where we know that water conservation actually really not only saves water, but can really reduce electricity use, which has a direct effect on emissions. So this is something that we're tracking closely. And as we adopt resolutions like the board did for the non-functional turf, and we really expand conservation efforts, this is a place where we'll be able to track and claim those emissions reductions under our climate action plan as well. Some of the next steps, as I mentioned, we will be building out a program to transition to a zero emission fleet, and developing a schedule to replace fossil fuel vehicles. We're working on a green procurement policy to really be thoughtful about the materials that we're using and looking for those materials that have less carbon embedded in them, or that are more local and have less transportation associated with them. We're also developing a comprehensive climate vulnerability assessment. So to really look at all of our vulnerabilities and risks across the district of all types of climate impacts, not just drought, but also flooding and extreme heat and wildfire, and how those cascading impacts can affect our water supplies as well as our operations. We're working closely with the Bay Delta Group to identify opportunities for carbon sequestration projects on the Delta Islands. This is a huge opportunity to create habitat, sequester carbon, and protect our fresh water supply. And something I'm particularly excited about is we're looking at metropolitan properties that are underutilized right now, and looking for opportunities to partner with renewable energy developers and find ways to play a role in expanding California's renewable energy portfolio, and really being a partner on those projects. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you all. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Liz, very, very much for that update here. And I'll just open it up to any questions or comments from those who are on the call or who are present. And Greg, if you'll help also identify anybody. Anyone raise your hands or let us know. Well, maybe no questions, Liz. I don't know. You know, I just want to say, I guess one thing I love is that, you know, look, at the end of the day, the vision and the mission obviously align with West Basin very well. And of course, your biggest use, you know, or carbon footprint is energy. So that's the area you all can make the most impact on. I'm glad to see, obviously, dealing with emissions and other issues. You got plans there too, but I don't know. I don't really have any questions as well. I'm just really happy that they are moving forward with this at Metropolitan. So I'm going to ask one last time if there's any questions or comments. And
Well,
seeing
thank you.
none.
I'm available
yeah.
anytime if there are questions.
Okay, great. And thank you so much, Liz.
My pleasure.
Oh.
All right, Greg, if you'll take us to the next item, please.
Absolutely. And I just want to also add, thank you, Liz, for a really informative presentation. You know, perhaps there'd be an opportunity for us to talk offline and I can ask a few questions of my own. Okay, so with that, we are pleased to have Dimitri Polizos here, team manager from Metropolitan Water Resources Management Group, here to brief us on water supply conditions. So Dimitri, please take her away.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me back. And very happy that I can actually share some good news with respect to our water supplies. I haven't been able to do that for a few years. But let's just jump right in. I'm assuming you all can see the screen. Great.
Yes.
All right. Well, I always like to use this graphic. It is quite mesmerizing, but it does show the at least the satellite imagery of the nine atmospheric rivers that we've experienced since late December and into mid-January. And so this is just there's a fancy name for this graphic. I always forget what it is, but it's basically the amount of water that is precipitable out of the vapor in the atmosphere. And so you can see how these swaths of water are hitting the western part of the United States and obviously California here. And that's what we experienced. And here's a summary of everything of those atmospheric rivers that brought all the snowpack and the rainfall. The arrows here indicate the direction and how they hit landfall, and the color indicates the strength. And out of the 9, we received 5 that are characterized as strong or higher or greater in strength. So that's pretty significant. And to just give you some context, 2017, of course, was one of the wettest year, at least for Northern California. That year, we had 13 strong or so atmospheric rivers. So there's still time for the end of the wet season, but we'll see what happens as this continues to develop. But this has definitely increased or helped boost our water supply. And of course, you probably are all aware the State Water Project allocation did increase from 5% to 30%. Just wanted to give you a quick little history here of the allocations over time. Coincidentally enough, this is actually 2006 is when I started at Metropolitan. Also a coincidence, I hope. We never saw 100% allocation during my tenure here at Metropolitan. I'm sure that is a coincidence, but I also wanted to point out here that just to see how remarkable things can change and how quickly they can change. Our current allocation of 30% actually matches the last 3 years worth of allocations that we received from the State Water Project. So that gives you a sense of how dry things were over the last 3 years. And we're starting to see that pattern change and kind of moving out of these dry conditions. So let's talk about what actually is in the allocation right now that allowed the department to increase. And it's really what they saw in hand, the actual runoff in the reservoirs. And so this is a look at Oroville. And of course, that is the key reservoir on the State Water Project system. And you see here the darker blue shaded region is last year's water levels. The light blue is this year. And these atmospheric rivers essentially, we saw this dramatic spike in storage increases in Oroville, 1.3 million acre feet since late December. That's a remarkable increase. That's certainly a great thing to see. And this in particular was what enabled the department to increase, or gave them the confidence that they would be able to increase the allocation. And again, this is water in hand. This is water up in storage. The other reservoir we tend to look at is San Luis Reservoir. And that's what you're seeing here. And you can see also the increase in storage levels here. The importance of this particular reservoir is that this gives us an indication of the department's ability to actually export water out of the Delta. And a lot of what drove these higher export rates that we saw that allowed us to start filling the State Water Project share of San Luis is the higher flows that we saw on the San Joaquin River. And in these wet years, we like to look at the San Joaquin River. What happens there gives us a good sense of the department's ability to export from the Delta. In other words, the higher the flows you see on the San Joaquin, it helps the department satisfy their regulatory requirements, certainly in the late winter and early spring, and allows them to export and not reduce those exports. That would be another way to satisfy those regulatory requirements, to reduce exports, which again then would be reduced ability to increase the allocation. But we're seeing these higher San Joaquin flows, and we've seen them to date, and that allowed them to export, and that's why we saw that nice increase in San Luis. Now, there's a flip side to this. There is the potential of filling San Luis. Now that might sound like a good thing, and it is. However, Metropolitan and other contractors have water stored in San Luis. We call that carryover water. That's water we can carry from one year to the next. If the reservoir fills, that carryover, it essentially reverts to project water. So we lose that water that's in our name. So there's some things that we are anticipating that might happen. This reservoir, the state share may fill in late February, early March, given the export rates that we're seeing. So we need to make some accommodations for that so that we can move our water out so we don't lose it, essentially. But this is a good conversation to have. This is very different than what we've seen in the last 3 years. And to so dramatically start having these conversations about surplus conditions just gives you a sense of how dynamic the State Water Project system really is. Okay, now let's talk about what's not included in the studies, in the Department of Water Resources studies, their allocation studies. And that is the snowpack. And typically, and that is by design, they include the projected forecast, the snowmelt from the snowpack. They start including that in the February timeframe. So their February study, March, April, and so forth, those studies will start incorporating the snowmelt, the runoff forecasted from the snowpack. And so their next study is expected out later this month, on the 24th, I believe. And so we'll have a better sense of what the impact from all this snowpack will be. But needless to say, we do anticipate the allocation to increase once they incorporate this, because there is a lot of snow up there. What you're looking at here is the Northern Sierra. The graphic on the right gives you a sense of normal snowpack development. That's the bluish shaded region. Last year is shown in the white line, and you can see we are well beyond where we were last year. And in fact, we have more snow up there right now than we typically get at the peak of the season. And typically the peak is considered April 1st. So right now we're sitting at 113% of that April 1st peak. So that is very good news. And we anticipate to see a healthy runoff from this, which again will allow the department to increase the allocation further. So this is the case all up and down the state, and it's important to recognize that and to talk about how that might impact us. And so the Central Sierra is at 138%, so it's actually getting even better. There's more snow as you get south here in the state, and you'll see in the Southern Sierra as well. But it's important again for the Central Sierra. We like to look at this. It gives us a sense of what to anticipate with respect to the San Joaquin River flows. The healthier the snowpack there, the chances of the CVP, the Central Valley Project reservoirs filling increases. And when that happens, they start releasing what we call the flood control releases. And then that water ends up in the San Joaquin River, and that flushes into the Delta. And again, those higher flows allow the
Did we lose him?
Do we lose him?
He's frozen.
He's frozen. Looks like,
Hey, Dimitri, sorry you're frozen if you can't hear us.
I think he got too close to this. No, that's what happened.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if anybody can pick. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Let me
Back.
chat something. Okay, let me know if you hear me.
We hear you.
Hey,
Hold on a second here.
So we hear you now, Dimitri, if you can hear us.
So I don't know if you saw my chat. Can you see?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
hold on.
your chat just came through.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to continue. I'll see another thumbs up. Is this? Yeah, great. Okay. I'm not sure where I stopped, where I started to be frozen, but we look at all the snowpack up and down the state. Everything's doing really well, and they all have
Uh-oh. I think we lost him again.
Lost again.
And in the meantime, where's the slides?
Yeah,
Or
we
is he
lost
gonna-
the slides.
Can we display the slides on our side?
There we go.
so am I back?
Yo, you're back again. Yes.
Okay. So it
There
might
we
be
go.
best for you guys to run through the slides, but it might help with my bandwidth over here. So I'm not sure where I left off, but typically we do like to look at the various snowpack levels throughout the state. They do have an impact on us. The San Joaquin, so the Central Sierra is an indication of what we could see from the San Joaquin River. And again, the higher flows in the San Joaquin can translate to higher allocations for us. In the Southern Sierra, that's doing even better than the rest of the state, 160% of the April 1st average. And that gives us a sense of the water supply for LADWP. And back in 2017, they're actually doing much better today at 160% as of today's date versus where we were back in 2017, that really wet year that we had. And so the demands, we anticipate demands on metropolitan supplies will continue to go down because of improved local supplies, and we consider the LA Aqueduct a local supply. And it's not just the LADWP, but many of the other agencies, their local supplies are also improving, which again translates to lower demands. And so I say that if we go to the next slide, before we get to our water balances, I wanted to also show where we could anticipate this allocation going. So this graphic is the 8-station precipitation graphic, and it shows the blue band shows us the driest and wettest years that we've experienced over the last 100+ years. The orange line is where we are today. If you click one more, you'll see where we could anticipate to end the year. And so what this is basically showing is if we had...
I was just screaming at you. I said, are you gonna park your car backward?
Okay, I didn't freeze. I didn't freeze again, did I? No, okay. So if we anticipate dry conditions from this point forward, that's the bottom edge of that That would be the bottom edge.
Some interference here.
Yeah,
No,
I
no
think I
worries.
just got muted. Thank you. Okay, go
Great.
ahead, Dimitri. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
no problem, no problem. So this is looking at if we had dry conditions for the rest of this water year, that's the bottom edge of that gold band. And so that's considered, we technically call that the 90% exceedance. Basically, we would expect 10% of the time it would be even drier than that. So it's a pretty dry condition. At the top edge of the band is a wet condition from this point forward. And so what we can do is project out where we think the precip will be for the aid station. And so the dry end would be 51.7 inches. We would end the year, if we're dry conditions from this point forward, we would end the year with about 52 inches of rain. And then on the wet side, we could expect it to go as high as 72 or so inches of rain. And what we're able to do with that, Metropolitan has developed a model that can correlate the precipitation for the aid station into runoff. And that's that second line there. So on a dry condition, we would expect with 51.7 inches of precipitation to get about 16.5 million acre feet of runoff on the Sacramento River. That's what the SR there means. And so with that information, we can then look at the department's study that they released to kind of get a sense of, with that runoff, what kind of allocation we could expect. And their study shows that with 16.5 million acre feet runoff, that they would be able to support a 52% state water project allocation. Basically meaning if we saw dry conditions from this point forward, we could still expect the allocation to increase to about that 50% level. On the flip side, if things were to get wet, the runoff would be, our models are showing the runoff associated with 72.4 inches of precip would be roughly 27 million acre feet of runoff. Now, the department did not show us a study with that high of a runoff. The highest they showed us was about 22 million acre feet. But even with 22 million acre feet, they're showing that they could support a 69% allocation. So I show you this just to give you a sense that we firmly believe the allocation will continue to increase. Where it's going to go, we're not 100% sure, but this gives you a sense of a range of what we could see. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. So, but given, and then there's still a little bit more rain in the next 7 or so days, and that's what that green is showing us for both of the watersheds associated with our imported supplies. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. And not to disregard our Colorado River watershed, but it's doing well as well. Today, we're already at 85% of that April 1st average. So not as great as what we're seeing in California, but those storms did make it over to the upper Colorado River Basin, and the snowpack there is really healthy as well. So go ahead to the next slide. All right, so this is our water supply balance. This typically builds up, so it's a little bit more digestible, but essentially what you're seeing here is our supplies stacking up on the Colorado and the State Water Project. So this is a large improvement from what I showed you the last month, where the State Water Project only had the 5% and the human health and safety component. Now we're at 30% allocation, so that's reflected there. On our Colorado River side, we're showing 149,000 acre feet of that higher priority water use. So this is water of those higher priority water users in California that if they use a certain amount, that actually comes out of Metropolitan's entitlement. That number is decreasing because of their conditions are improving as well. And all the rain that they're receiving, they're not bringing in as much, they're not diverting as much from the river, which then translates to potentially more water for Metropolitan. So we expect to see our supplies increase beyond the 1.43 million acre feet where we are, what I'm showing here today. So keep that in mind. And then on the demand side, that has dropped since the time I presented last month. And primarily dropped because of the improved local conditions and the improved local supply production. And so that translates to lower demands on Metropolitan. So that's what we're forecasting here. We expect that to continue to drop. Where I'm getting at here is last month we were at about 570,000 acre foot supply demand gap. We're now at 111, but we do anticipate supplies to increase, demands to come down. So those lines are going to cross. And so we're going to more than likely be in a surplus condition this year where we are putting water back into storage. So that's really the positive news. And one more point on here, given the 30% state water project allocation, we are no longer in a shortage condition. And this did not necessarily impact West Basin directly, but this is for the state water project dependent areas that can only get water from the state water project system. We now have identified with the 30% allocation and the water we have in storage, enough supplies to meet their demands. And so that shortage condition, that emergency condition that we had in that area, we're no longer in that. We now have identified sufficient supplies for them for this calendar year. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. So with respect to the various declarations that we're currently operating under, in April of last year, we did declare that water shortage emergency condition because at that time with a 5% allocation last year, we did not have enough supplies for the state water project dependent areas. So we had to implement this emergency water conservation program. Right now, per that program, as we increase our supplies, we spread that supply out to those 6 member agencies. And we did do that earlier or a few weeks ago as soon as we heard about the increase in the allocation. But again, we are really going past or away from this shortage condition. And again, we do have available supplies to meet the state water project dependent area demands. And so staff is considering rescinding the mandatory restrictions that we have in place for those agencies. And so that would be those very restrictive 1 day a week outdoor watering. Also, the restrictions are holding them to volumetric limits and the like. So we're looking to rescind those pieces of the water shortage emergency condition that we're under. And the last point here, the 30% state water project with a 30% state water project allocation, the department essentially is no longer allocating human health and safety, so they are now moving away from that. The good news there, obviously, well, that is obviously good news, but we're also have not accrued any human health and safety obligations. So any water that we received, a human health and safety water, we have to repay. So there's no accrual of any obligation of that this year. We do have an obligation from last year, roughly 140,000 acre feet. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. The other declaration we're under is the regional drought emergency. Recently in December, the board reaffirmed that emergency that was originally put in place back in November of 2021. That reaffirmation kind of expanded that drought emergency and really focused on both of our imported supplies to find ways to limit our use. Again, this was put in place when we were at a 5% state water project allocation and the third year of drought. That declaration also allowed us to, pursue or have us pursue water transfers and exchange opportunities. And so we're continuing to do that. And it also signaled the possibility of going into a region-wide allocation, what we call the Water Supply Allocation Plan, or the WASUP. That is still under consideration and under discussion, and we're coordinating with the member agencies. And so those discussions are ongoing. But some of the things that we will consider and will be discussing with the member agencies is when we implement a water supply allocation, we do look at our imported supplies, the outlook for those imported supplies. Obviously, the State Water Project is improving. The Colorado River is not necessarily improving, so we need to consider all those factors. We have to look at where our demands are. The good news is those continue to remain low and are continuing to drop, the demands on Metropolitan, and also our projected storage levels. That's a key factor that we consider when we have those discussions about whether or not to implement a water supply allocation. And as I mentioned earlier, we are projecting that those lines are going to cross, our supplies are going to exceed demands. So we'll be we'll have the opportunity potentially this year to put water into storage. I think the next slide is our last slide here, just a summary. Yeah, so again, allocation increased, and that is just reflecting the water in hand, what we're seeing physically in the reservoirs. We anticipate that to increase once they incorporate the forecasted runoff from the snowpack. And again, we have seen the demands drop. We are projecting them to drop, and to continue. They will likely continue to drop, and we're gearing up for surplus conditions. And I've always said this, and some people think I'm crazy, but it is more difficult and challenging in wet years to manage water than it is in dry years. There's a lot of decisions to be made, and strategic decisions. What we do today helps us get through those drier years, and that's why the message is always we need to continue to water to use our water wisely and use it efficiently. This isn't a call to take our foot off the pedal by any means. We're able to take some of these draconian measures and restrictions that we have in place, but we need to continue to conserve, because the more we do that, that increases our ability to maximize our storage. And that is what helps us, one of the key pieces that helps us through the drier periods. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and sorry about all the technical glitches.
Great, thank you, Dimitri, and no worries there. I couldn't even get online earlier, right? So you think we'd figure it out by now. With that, I said, number one, excellent presentation. Number two, I see Director Lefebvre has his hand up. So Russ, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. So, Dimitri, I feel pretty naive asking this question. Could we not reduce our draw on the Colorado River instead of putting excess water into storage, given the situation on the Colorado?
Yeah, so what this allows us to do when we have these healthier supplies on the state, and as we see that really materialize, we're at a 30% right now, but as we see that increase, it gives us a lot of flexibility as to what we can do and how we can help the situation on the Colorado by all means. So it's going to be a mixture of backing off on Colorado and also storing water.
This is Adele Haj Khalil, Dr. Lefebvre. One of the things that we need to make sure is we have 6 million people that were on the state water dependent areas that were receiving health and safety, and their conditions were really in dire condition. As you remember, last year we had to do the emergency action by the board. Our commitment, our goal is to take any water that we receive from the state water project, access water, that we store it in the priority that we discussed, that we gave presentation on. One is to put water in Lake Castaic. Second is to put water in the St. Louis Reservoir. And third is to refill Diamond Valley Lake. Those are the priorities we have. I don't want people really trying to say and put out there that the position is that really right now we can actually accept some of the cuts in the Colorado River discussion because we have some extra water coming from the state water project. That's a dialogue that we're trying to make sure that we don't step into. We have a whole complete communication plan as we are trying to manage our water supply we're getting from the state water project without compromising our negotiating position with the Colorado River. I just want to put that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Adele. That helps.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Russ. I see EJ Caldwell, our Assistant General Manager's hand up. EJ. You're still muted, EJ.
I'm muted.
There you go.
Thank you, President Houston, and thank you, Dimitri, for joining us today. I had a quick question about, your summary slide has it on here, that the demands on Metropolitan are expected to decrease further. That's something that we in the industry don't always think about. We're always concentrating on the Colorado River and the State Water Project. Do you have projections on what that reduction might be? And as I recall, a few years back when we had those significant winter storms, the city of Los Angeles had really so much water that they're having a problem finding places to put that water. And are we in a better place to handle a situation like that?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to be working with the agencies to see who does need help to to manage their supplies. And I can tell you, we have a lot of holes to fill. So we have a lot of places to put the water. And this is happening early enough in the year that we're going to have some time to know, to kind of piece it all together and figure out the right places to put the water. But like Adele said, there are some priorities to make sure that we safeguard those state water project dependent areas. And that's one of the key drivers to potentially seeing increased or lower demands is because of how healthy the LA aqueduct supplies are anticipated to be. Right now, our demand forecast reflects an improved situation there, but we're working with LADWP to kind of hone in on what that number might end up at. And I suspect that it's going to improve enough that we're going to see a continued drop to our demands. And again, that bodes well to having more water to play with and more water to store, and it gives us flexibility to help out on both systems.
Well, thank you for the exciting news.
Glad I was able finally to share some positive news.
There you go. Thank you. Real last call for any other questions. EJ, your hand's up again, or you're good? You're good? Okay. Anybody else? Hearing none, I do have one or two minor questions, Dimitri. One is, do we have any predictions for what the rest of the water year has coming down the pike? I honestly have not paid attention, but in the next few months, are we expecting more snow and rain, or do we know at this point?
So I don't put too much into the long-term forecasts. I've done this for 15 years. They're never right. I like to use the 7-week, maybe the 2-week out, and it does show some precipitation. Nothing to me is showing a complete drying off, and we've never seen it all completely dry off. And that's why I wanted to show that 8-station precipitation graphic, that even if things continue to be on the drier side from this point forward, it's still we're in a much better position or condition than we have been in the last 3 years. But it's hard to predict, what we're going to see. All I know is in the next 2 weeks, there is going to be a little bit of precip. No atmospheric rivers necessarily, but some precip. Nothing to start melting the snow this early. So that's also good news, because we don't want to see that happen too quick of a melt, because the infrastructure in Northern California just can't handle that inflow of a vast snow melt. But so far things are cold, and the snowpack is healthy, and it's still there, and it hasn't shown any signs of melting yet. Okay, great. And one last question, and this may actually go into your conversations at the board retreat or what have you, but the messaging on these current conditions, yet we're still in a drought, or we should be really cognizant of this. I mean, look, all the headlines I'm seeing is we have massive amounts of rain and snow right now. You're showing us really good numbers. I am very, of course, concerned that the public is going to completely go in a different direction, and it's on us to make sure that we keep somehow talking about this. So just a quick thought from you all, what is the messaging that we expect is going to be coming down the pike, really like this month, to say, well, I don't know what to say that, we are not out of the woods yet. So what is the messaging that we can expect to hear from you all, let alone we got to do that on our end?
Sure. It's okay, Dee. Let me just start off by saying that's really a great point and a great effort that my team is working hard on ensuring the message is out there that even with the rain that we're seeing, where we are continuing to be in a condition that we need to conserve to save water. We're not out of the woods yet, but also the climate has changed, and so we should change ourselves too. That's part of. So this morning I had a press event that I did up in Rowland Heights, where we went to a house that's being converted from grass to a drought-resilient native plants, and we had a large presence of media, CBS, Spectrum, ABC, and Telemundo, and the discussion was exactly what you said, President Houston. It's really about, people see rain, they think the drought is over. We're saying we see rain, we see that we need to replenish our savings accounts, And everything we do in our properties in conserving the use is going to help us create more water so we can store to address the dire condition we're seeing in the Colorado River and the cuts we're talking about right now. And the end of the day, we need to make sure we're ready and saving every drop, and starts with our use. And that's the message we're putting out. I know Dee and her team is going to probably be working with all the PIOs on the common message and advertising. But it just happened this morning that I had interviews with over 4 news media folks that talked about this. And Dee, anything you want to add about how you coordinate this more?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Adele. A couple of things that I would just add to what Adele said. One is that the good news is it's no secret that we're dealing with a challenge on the Colorado River. We've had great media coverage over the last week about the challenges on the Colorado River. So I don't think it's a mystery to the public that there are ongoing water issues. And I think also the fact that we got, we were in a situation where we had a third of our service area significantly cut back this last year. There's a recognition that there needs to be a longer term investment in reliability and sustainability for the region in order for us to adapt to the climate change that we're already experiencing. So we are working on a sort of multiple paths right now. We are retooling and have retooled our conservation messaging to acknowledge that Mother Nature is helping out right now. And so people do not need to be irrigating their grass. And we are shifting and looking at our investments that support ongoing conservation, but in a manner that also acknowledges what is the situation for the total region, not so much focused in the extraordinary conservation area. We're also needing to tell California's story about our Colorado River supplies and the importance of these supplies to this region. So that's going to be a big focus of our efforts going forward, is helping everyone know just how much water we depend on the Colorado River for, how we get that water in the form of a lot of different agricultural partnerships to fill our Colorado River aqueduct, and how we work as a state together. So you'll be seeing more information about that coming out from us soon. There was one other point I wanted to make that is just escaped me now, but I know, President Houston, that you're big in social media, so you'll see us in social media and in other circles trying to help take what is kind of a complex issue right now for how we need to operate in the interim and how we're working with the federal government, and then what we also need to do long term to address the larger shortage on the Colorado River, which, as Adele said, it requires ongoing commitment to conservation and ongoing investment for the infrastructure in the region. So you'll be hearing more from us on that. Oh, I remembered. We've got a public information officers meeting on the 16th. So we'll be talking with your staff about these issues, and we're also looking at some message development with some survey work. So we'll be trying to enforce our messaging by getting an assessment of where the public is right now, including on the value of water, which is something our chair has been speaking about recently.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And
My pleasure.
And as we end this, I'm glad to hear you mentioned about the conditions of those state water project dependent agencies. And Dimitri, you had that in the presentation, that obviously you all will be talking about how do you potentially rescind some of that, but of course that gets, touchy in all messaging. So anyways, we're fortunate to be in a good place with precipitation thus far, but yet it's difficult for us to continue maintaining the other message about, the long-term situation for the West. And so definitely looking forward to what you all help us with and come up with, because I know that the messaging to me and what I've seen in the different papers and other articles around the region, of course, they paint a pretty picture right now. And we were doing well that most people were really engaged, and now they might think that this is over. So anyway, thank you for all that. And we're really counting on you to help us out when it comes to getting that word out in the messaging. Okay, I know we are pushing some time here, but we have 2 more items, so let's go ahead into item 7C as in cat. Greg, if you can tee that up, please.
We have our general manager of Metropolitan, Adele Hodgkill, here to give us an update on the proposed Colorado River modeling framework. And perhaps he can take us right into item B as well, updating on the upcoming board retreat. So handing it over to Adele Hodgkill.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you, President Houston, and congratulations on taking on the role of president for West Basin. First of all, I want to start by congratulating and thanking Director Williams for his service at Metropolitan Board and for the dedication and the work that he has done representing West Basin in Metropolitan. I want to thank him on behalf of Metropolitan employees, the board, and everyone. I want to say thank you very much for what you've done. And I want to congratulate Vice President Alvarez, who is going to be sworn in half an hour down here in Metropolitan as a new director for MWD. I want to just talk about Colorado River. You probably heard the news. It's been in the news since last week. And really what we have last 2 weeks and what we have right now is as in August, the Bureau of Reclamation declared that based on the hydrology and their modeling and prediction, that we need to cut 2 to 4 million acre feet of water use in the Colorado River watershed. And we start working together. We are facing a 23-year mega drought impacted by the changing climate, and what we need to do is reduce the water we're consuming. And we've been working very hard on negotiating an agreement. And what we have is the Bureau of Reclamation has introduced a supplementary EIS for analysis of the conditions, and they wanted us to work together in developing alternatives for it to be modeled to see the impacts of these cuts or reduction on the environment. And we tried hard to come to a 7-state agreement on what the cuts look like. It was difficult. Basically, a week and a half ago on Friday in Denver, the agreement could not be reached. And it was the issue was not the amount of cuts that have to be taken. It was the how to implement the cuts. I think both proposals, the 6-state proposal and the California compromise, looked at about 3.3 million acre feet of cuts. The issue we had is how to implement this. The 6-state proposal really ignored the priority and the water rights that have been established over the years under the law of the river. It was unfair for California and Southern California because most of the cuts were in California. Did not recognize all our past conservation and work that we have done with ag and how we've done in working together. What we offered is we need to shore up the Lake Mead and Lake Powell over the next 3 years as we start discussing the guidelines starting in 2026. And those tough negotiations have to happen. But what we felt is the first thing we need to do here is let's utilize the money from the federal government under the Inflation Reduction Act. And there is 32 proposals with the Bureau of Reclamation from water agencies and tribes and others that put on the table their interest in putting water in Lake Mead in lieu of money of $400 an acre foot. And we feel that that should have been done expedited quickly to put that water and move quickly on this effort. And then we should continue working gradually in an adaptive manner to find where the cuts are and do it slowly and without compromising the health and safety of urban communities, without wasting the storage of water that we put in Metropolitan, put in Lake Mead over the years. We actually saved the entire region by the 100 the $1 billion investment we made in conservation that put in close to 1.5 million acre feet of storage in Lake Mead that helped Arizona and others avoid cuts under the drought contingency plan. And we wanted to basically have this process be iterative and not be quickly reactive. We're saying don't, completely amputate the leg if you can cure the wound. That's what we're saying. Let's cure the wound first before we amputate the leg. And we have a huge support right now from our legislative congressional leaders and two senators. You saw the message from the two senators. It's a unified message, very strong message in support of California. The governor and the leadership in Sacramento, along with the leadership in both the Senate and the Assembly, are in support of us. The congressional leadership, we just finished a call with Congresswoman Napolitano right now, and we're working with Congressmember Calvert and others to host a meeting in DC, a congressional briefing on the California water issues, including Colorado River. And I think to me is the California Compromise, I think really speaks about doing the right thing, but doing it in a very responsible way and not quickly come in and cut everyone, including California, without really understanding the priority system and understanding what's at the table right now, and prematurely doing the cuts before we do the analysis. One of the things in the 6 states proposal is to cut Mexico by 700,000 acre feet, but Mexico is not at the table, and nobody has talked to Mexico yet. You can't do that, and we say let's figure out how we can move collaboratively. But the good news is California is united. We are working together, and I think we are coming back. We're going to continue working with the other 6 states on finding some resolution and some compromise that we can work through. The Bureau of Reclamation is going to do the analysis that's needed, the environmental impact, so we can decide the impact of what cuts we're making on the environment, the habitat, the future of our communities. We have Director Touton, or Commissioner Touton from the Bureau of Reclamation, visiting with our board on Monday next week as part of our board retreat. So we look forward to having chat with her and her leadership with her as we discuss our water supply plan. I want to jump to the next thing is we're at a crossroads in Metropolitan. The last 100 years, what we've done, served us well. And what we're seeing through the state water dependent areas issues we dealt with, the 5% allocation over 3 years, the cuts in the Colorado River, all these things are coming together because climate has changed and we need to change. So what we're doing under the leadership of the board is convening the board and the member agencies to come together to really frame the future water supply of Metropolitan under the changed climate conditions. And there'll be hopefully some clear dialogue as what would MET need to do for the member agencies. What's the role of MET? What do you see as member agencies, the value of MET to you? What we need to do together and who's going to pay for it and how we're going to pay for it so no one is left behind. All these things are going to be discussed at the board through an interactive, facilitated process, and hopefully we'll come up with key principles that will direct us all as we move forward. The thing that I know it was put in here as a report to the member agency managers meeting. I tell you, when I came into Metropolitan, I wanted to activate the role of the member agency managers and have them be a partner, a thought partner, operational partner, strategy partner with Metropolitan and with me as we move forward, because MET is for everyone. Doesn't matter how big of an agency, how small of an agency, MET is for you. So we moved the member agency managers meeting to meet 2 weeks before the board And as we're planning for this retreat, we actually engaged the managers in the dialogue and framing the questions, in helping us in terms of putting the the framework for this retreat. And we asked all of them to provide us feedback so we can really answer the questions that need to be answered and asked. Greg, I want to acknowledge Greg for his leadership at that meeting. He had some good input on behalf of West Basin, but also on behalf of the entire service area. He said something to the effect that it's important to not build islands here, that we need to build continuity and relationships. We need to not provide different messages. We need to have a unified message. It's exactly what you said, President Houston. You said we need a unified message, all of us. We cannot be speaking different messages, and this time is now. We need to do that together. So with the help of Greg Reed, your manager, general manager, and the help of others, we have done that. We have a clear, hopefully a nice facilitated discussion that we look forward to the board's direction as we move forward in the implementation of what we need to do to prepare us into the future. So I'm so proud of the work that the general managers across the region have done, but specifically Greg Reed and his leadership coming in here together. So we created a discussion guide with questions for the board. We have interactive discussion, but at the end of the day, it's going to create policy direction for me and my team to work with my partner general managers across the region to help us provide a resilient, safe future in the face of changing climate with no one left behind. And with that, I look forward to hearing from everyone next week. And I'm excited about this, I would call it, transformational moment in our history. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Adele, for the report. And let me just see if there's any questions for Adele on these two items at this moment. If so, raise your hand or just speak out. I see Director Williams is raising his hand. Go ahead, Director Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to say what I just heard is what I wanted to hear for a long time. This is really great, and I look forward to the success that we're going to have ahead. And this should be something we should never, ever stop doing, because one of the things that I noticed is that our customers who depend on water from us forget that we live in a situation, environment that is an arid area, and will always be dependent on water. And that over the years, I've learned that our region imports more water than any other place on Earth, and that we need to, as you say, have a uniform message, because what our customers hear first is they get their information from the news, and in a day you get 4 or 5 or 6 messages from the radio or TV, and you hear one from us in a week. So I think we are on the right track, and I look forward to us increasing our message in the way that it should be, and that we are really will conserve water to the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Williams. And anybody else? Seeing none, I do have a question for you, Adele. Just make sure I heard it right. How much was it they were asking Mexico to cut? What was that number?
It's like 680,000 acre feet.
Okay, it was in, okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you. And the other thing, I was going to just make a comment to you or your whole team and everybody who's working on this on behalf of California. You do have the weight of us all on your shoulders as you work together. And I know you know that, but wow, 40 million people here are depending on what you all are working on and these decisions with those other states and the federal government. So we're counting on you. And with that, I want to say, these are all excellent reports, really good updates. And the great thing is these are on our, publicly on our meetings, so people can access these PowerPoints and so on. So we appreciate that. I don't have anything else, and I know we're pushing the clock here, but I just want to say again, thank you very much to everyone who presented today from Metropolitan. We greatly appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to move forward here. We have no pending items on number 8. We now have no other items on number 9. These agendas have all these interesting things on them at this meeting. And I want to open it up if there are any. For some reason, we don't have director comments on here that I see, but to my colleagues on the West Basin Board, any director comments from my colleagues? So Director Williams.
No, thank you.
All right. Director Gray. I don't think our other 2 board members are here. So with that, again, I say this has been an excellent meeting. We're looking forward to the work that's going to come out of that retreat. And we're also looking forward to our next time to meet together. And so with that, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your kind and generous comments, Adele. And thank you to all of our presenters for today. Hope to see you in person next month.